You're looking for the signal in the noise, right? You want to understand what matters without getting bogged down.
Cut through the clutter.
Well, you've come to the right place. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that's really buzzing in Brazil right now.
Which is?
This recent increase in the IOF, that's the tax on financial operations.
Right, the IOF. Basically, think of it as a tax that kicks in for a whole range of financial activities.
Like what sort of things?
Like using your credit card when you travel internationally, or maybe sending money to someone overseas. Governments use these taxes, to manage money flows and, well, bring in revenue.
Makes sense. And the person kind of at the center of all this is Brazil's Finance Minister Fernando Haddad.
Yes, I get.
Now, some commentators, they've started calling him tax ad. It's a bit of a playful jab,
Hey, yeah.
Because initially there was talk about maybe easing up on taxes, but instead, boom, we've actually seen a pretty notable hike.
A bit of a U-turn then.
Seems like it. So, our goal in this deep dive is really to get to the bottom of these IOF increases. What exactly has changed? What's the thinking supposedly behind it?
And what could the ripple effects be? We've been looking at, news reports, expert opinions.
Exactly. So what's fascinating here are the specifics. Who and what do these increases actually affect?
Okay, let's start with those everyday international transactions. So for Brazilians using their credit or debit cards abroad.
Yeah.
Or even those prepaid travel cards you load up before a trip, the IOF rate, it's gone up from 3.38% to 3.5%.
Okay, 3.38 to 3.5. On its own, that sounds tiny, almost.
It really does seem like a tiny sliver, yeah. But, as our sources point out, you multiply that small percentage by the sheer number of transactions.
Right, millions of them.
It adds up. It becomes a significant amount of money flowing to the government. But, okay, get this. That's not even the biggest change.
Oh, there's more.
Absolutely. The really significant jump, the one causing a lot more waves, is the tax on sending money out of Brazil and buying foreign currency in cash.
Okay, how big a jump are we talking?
That one shot up from 1.1% all the way to 3.5%.
Wow, 1.1 to 3.5. That's nearly a 250% increase.
It's huge. And it's worth remembering, as one news anchor pointed out, the previous government actually had a plan on the books to reduce that 1.1% rate.
Reduce it to what?
Gradually down to zero, actually, by 2029. So this hike, it's a complete reversal.
Zero by 2029, now 3.5%. That feels like a much more substantial hit, doesn't it? Especially for, families sending money home or businesses making international payments.
Definitely. And it doesn't stop there either.
Still more. Okay.
There's also a brand new tax. It's 5% on monthly contributions to these things called VGBL private pension plans, but only on the amount over 50,000 reais per month.
VGBL plans, those are pretty common for retirement savings, right? They have tax advantages.
Exactly. And previously, those larger contributions above that 50K threshold, they weren't taxed in this way.
So why the new tax? What's the official reason?
Well, the government's argument is that this exemption, the one for contributions over 50,000 reais, was kind of being used as a loophole.
A loophole how?
They're saying some high-income folks were using it less for actual retirement saving and more as a way to park money and avoid other taxes. So the 5% tax is meant to close that loophole and, make things fairer. And, of course,
increase revenue.
Increase revenue, yes.
Okay, so the official line is fairness, closing loopholes for the wealthy. But the main commentator in our sources, he's not really buying it.
No. What's his take?
His analysis is pretty skeptical. He basically sees it as a straightforward revenue grab. He even quipped, well, look who it is, tax ad strikes again.
Oh, okay.
And he raises an interesting point. If the idea was maybe to simplify the IOF rates, why pick the highest existing rate, the 3.5%, as the new benchmark instead of, say, the lower 1.1%?
That's a fair question.
Yeah.
Why not choose the lower rate if simplification was part of the goal?
Right. It seems like a less painful adjustment could have been possible. It really makes you question the priorities, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, while tackling tax avoidance is, a valid goal, the size of this increase plus the other hikes, it strongly suggests there's a broader need to, shore up government finances.
Exactly. And the way this was rolled out is also getting criticized. Minister Haddad mentioned getting subsidies, like helpful suggestions after the announcement.
Implying some consultation happened.
Sort of, yeah. But journalist Eliane Cantanhede, she paints a very different picture. She reported an avalanche of complaints from the financial market.
The avalanche.
Yeah. Describing their reaction as astonished and perplexed. Sounds less like friendly feedback and more like serious pushback.
Astonished and perplexed. That doesn't sound good. So connecting this to the bigger economic picture, what are the analysts saying?
Well, Dimitri Maggioli offers a pretty critical view. He points out that any government retreat on these heights, maybe some minor tweaks we haven't detailed, was minimal.
So the main thrust of the increase remains.
Pretty much, yeah. And what's really significant is his argument that this whole thing contradicts earlier promises Haddad made against raising taxes.
Okay, broken promises.
And worse, Magnoli says it actually undermines the government's own fiscal framework, their big economic plan and budget rules they just set up.
Yeah. Wait, so it's not just a broken promise. It might actually destabilize their whole economic strategy.
That's Magnoli's take, yeah. He suggests this IOF hike is just a short-term patch, a way to grab cash now to meet targets.
But doesn't fix the underlying issue, which he sees as government spending.
Exactly. He thinks it could actually make the long-term fiscal situation worse, maybe even setting up a crisis for the next government because spending isn't under control.
That's a heavy critique.
It is. And our source Commentators seems just as frustrated, kind of wondering aloud why there isn't stronger opposition to this in Congress. It does make you think about the political dynamics,
Yeah, definitely. And Canton Hay, the journalist, she draws an interesting parallel. Remember the recent PIX crisis in Brazil?
Vaguely. PIX is the instant payment system, right? There was some controversy.
Right. Debates about security, fraud potential. Canton Hyde sees a similar pattern here with the IOF changes.
What pattern?
Internal disagreements within the government, not enough talking to people affected, really unclear communication. And then some messy backtracking. She aptly described the initial announcement about these IOF changes as unintelligible.
Unintelligible, like just impossible to understand.
Pretty much, yeah. Very hard to figure out what was actually happening.
Unintelligible feels generous. Our commentator is much blunter. He doesn't call it just an error. He labels the whole thing as incompetence.
Strong word.
Yeah. He argues that after months supposedly preparing this, the actual rollout and communication were just, fundamentally flawed.
Which brings us to, the impact on people and the general feeling out there. There's often this narrative about taxing the rich.
Yeah, that always comes up.
But our commentator is pretty skeptical about whether this tax hike really fits that story in practice. Well, he even suggested, kind of pointedly, that a prominent political figure should make a video showing how these IOF increases will actually hit everyday Brazilians.
Interesting. Implying it's not just the rich who'll feel it.
Exactly. And the fact that some media outlets are already putting out warnings about potential fake news around this whole thing, it suggests there's maybe an underlying worry about how the public might react once the full impact sinks in.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a growing sense that the government's message isn't quite matching up with people's lived experience. The commentator wraps up by noting that public patience seems to be wearing thin.
Yeah, which really leaves a big question hanging, doesn't it? Question for you, the listener, to think about.
What's that?
Is this IOF hike a necessary evil, a tough but needed step for Brazil's financial health? Or is it maybe a sign of, missteps, government fumbles that could damage trust and maybe even hold back the economy in the long run?
It's definitely not simple. Looking at these different takes, it's clear this isn't black and white. You've got the official reasons.
Closing loopholes, fiscal responsibility.
But then you've got these really sharp criticisms about how it was done, the communication, the broken promises, and what it might mean for the economy, for ordinary people.
Yeah, the debate in Brazil is clearly far from over.
Definitely. We've really just scratched the surface here in this deep dive.
Indeed. We hope this gives you a better handle on the situation. We encourage you to keep following developments and, form your own informed view on these really complex issues unfolding in Brazil.